Okay, let's continue on in our book on page 44. We're going to keep fixing up this image that we're working on. So if you go back into Bridge, and most recently we were in that extra folder that I had you guys work on. So you need to back out of that and get back to your book files. And in, lesson 2, we have one that's called our namefix.jpg. That's the one that we're going to open up. So this is now not a PSD, it's a JPEG, and it is one single background layer. So the brightening, the levels, and the curves that we did were applied to it, and it was just flattened down into one thing. All right, if you look at this image and maybe zoom in a little bit, you can tell that there's a crease along this left-hand side, or some water damage and something that's not quite right. So there's tons of healing tools. Normally, again, this is a whole lecture, so we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg right now, but we're going to fix this photo up using some healing tools. In our tools panel, about a third of the way down, is the spot healing brush. It looks like a band-aid with a little circle behind it, and that is the tool that we want to click to choose on. I want you to click on the arrow at the bottom right and see the flyout menu, and notice that there are quite a few tools in here. Besides the spot healing brush, which we're going to use, we have the healing brush, the patch tool, the content aware move, and the red eye tool. So those are all healing tools nested in this one tool. So go back and make sure that the spot healing brush is the one that we have chosen. And then up at the top, we have some options specific to this brush. In the option bar, we're going to go up to the drop down that shows the size of the brush. We're going to click on that drop down arrow. Mine started at 19 pixels, but we can make it larger or smaller by pulling on this slider or typing in a number. And then a hardness of 100% or 0. A 0% hardness brush has a really, really soft edge, and a 100% brush has a hard edge. Do any of you paint with actual paintbrushes? So the stiff brushes that have hard edges, you can get a good clean line with, right? The real wispy ones, or the cheap ones, like I'm picturing watercolor crap that you buy for kids, like there's always a hair or two sticking out, right? So on the soft ones, it gives you a soft edge. So that's the kind of brush that you're picking. Do I want a hard edge or soft edge? And how big does it need to be? All right, they want us to go with a 25 pixel brush, this is not critical, and 100% hardness. And then we want to make sure in the type drop down that we have right here that we have content aware. And content aware is this really, really cool tool where Photoshop understands what pixels are around it and assumes that whatever pixels are underneath your cursor right now, you want to fix to match the surrounding pixels. So not only will it take, for example, if we use this tool right here, it's going to know that the sky to the left and the right, those are the kind of pixels that we probably want to fix it with. And it's also going to adjust the lighting, the brightness, the smoothness. It's going to fix it so that it blends in nicely rather than just take those pixels and hard paste them over top. So this brush is really, really smart. I want you to zoom in a little and start at the top of this image where we see this error. And if your brush needs to be a little bit bigger than the blemish. It needs to cover the blemish and sample some area to the right and the left so that it knows what it's working with. So in my opinion, this 25 pixel brush at my view is not great. A quick way to make your brush bigger or smaller is to use your keyboard and to use the left and right bracket keys, which are right above the enter on the right-hand side. So if you right bracket, you're going to make that bigger. So I hit the right bracket a few times, and you can see relative to the smudge how I made it look bigger. Now all you need to do, and just watch first, and then you can do this, is click and hold down your mouse, and it's gonna look like you're painting with black, but what it's really doing is seeing the problem underneath here and then sampling to the right and the left And when I let go, it not only fixes it with pixels, it also fixes the blending and the light mode. So little by little, you can work your way down this blemish. It's not perfect. If I look at the bridge here, it's not perfect, but it's not bad. And then I can hold down the space bar to get my hand tool, and I can move it down, and I can keep working down. Rather than do it in one long swat and screw up at the very end, do it in several chunks so that if you screw up, you only have a little piece of it that you've screwed up. So using the healing brush, you're going to paint over this. Just make sure that your cursor, like I said, is bigger than it so that it can sample a little bit to the left and the right to fix that area. Yes. Oh, okay, you have to be on this file, which is the flattened JPEG. If you opened up the PSD file, you at least have to be working on the actual layer itself, the background layer. You were working on the curves or the levels adjustment layer. So now that you have this one, it'll work. But I prefer you go and open up that JPEG that we made so that it's a flattened file. Is that the same issue? Okay, yeah. Yeah, if you opened your PSD and you have all those layers here, you have to be on the photo itself. You have to be actively on that lowest layer that's the photo. Otherwise, you're just trying to make a correction on a blank layer of levels or a blank layer. Okay? So spot healing brush is really smart. Yes? You're not in the right tool then. Go back to your tools and pick the spot healing brush, which is the top one. You're in the second one down. Yeah, this one doesn't require you to pick a sample point. It just goes to work. So spot healing brush, pretty powerful. You can see it's not perfect. I got some little weirdness going on here. I could have gone back in with a smaller brush and cleaned that up, or I could fix it in other ways, but in general, it definitely worked nicely on the sky. It worked nicely in a lot of places. So that's one of those 5 tools nested there that can help with healing things. All right, are we okay? Everybody good? Okay, do Command 0 to fit your image to your screen so you can see everything. The next tool that we're going to practice is nested in there. It's the patch tool. So in that same family of tools, click on the right arrow to fly out to more tools and go down to the third tool, which is the patch tool. Now what they're telling us, we're going to set it up in the option bar before we work. But basically, like I told you, the dude in the yellow shorts evidently is not part of their family, and we're about to wipe him out. So, up in our option panel for the patch tool, we see some icons. New selection, add to, remove from, or intersection. Make sure that that first one is the default that's chosen. The patch should be set to normal or content aware. Those are the 2 different options. We actually, in this one, want to do content aware. And then for the structure, this is a number 1 to 4, or 1 to 4, 1 to 7. We're going to do 4, which I think is what it was defaulted to. So 1 allows the loosest adherence to the structure that we make. 7 is the tightest. So we're like halfway through. We're like saying kind of, you know, don't exactly follow what I'm telling you, but don't go so loose that it doesn't work. So we're at the happy medium halfway point. All right, now what we're going to do, and you might want to zoom in on the boy a little bit, but you need to be able to see all of him and the space around him to the right. With this tool, you are going to click and drag and make a selection around him. Don't let up on your mouse. Watch what I'm doing. I'm not letting up on my mouse. We want to select him and his shadow, stay fairly close, and come back to the starting point. And when we get there, we can let go. And it's going to put marching ants around the boy with that patch tool. Okay, so go ahead and do that. Take your patch tool and drag a selection all the way around him and his shadow. Stay fairly close. Ultimately, what we're going to do is sample the area to the left of him, so you don't want to already be out there selecting it. Stay reasonably close to him. Once you let go, when you get back to the starting point, there's going to be marching ants or a selection around the boy. If you somehow screw up, just click away and redo it. Okay, once that's done, with that same tool, we're going to click inside of the boy, and we're going to hold down our mouse, and we're going to start dragging our selection, our marching ants, to the left. And whatever is under our marching ants now, it is filling in that spot where the boy was. If we go too far, we put the girl there. So don't go too far to the left. Just kind of go to where you have gotten rid of most of the boy. Mine is too big because I'm bumping up to the girl. And I still have a little shadow there. When you let go, it's going to do all the thinking and blending the best that it can. And that's the version that I got, which is not super great. Notice I still personally have a shadow in there, and it put this big dip in the ground. So if I wanted to retry it, I could do that as well. Maybe say that's not quite what I was going for, so I'm just going to retry it. So it's going to do a job. I'm not even going to say a good job or a bad job. It's going to do a job. Sometimes it's awesome, sometimes it's horrible, but almost always it's the quickest starting point, and you can go back and tweak with other tools from there. The other tools would take you a lot longer to get that much covered. So this is a good starting point using the patch tool. To get rid of our marching ants, a keyboard shortcut that you have to know in your sleep. Deselect is Command D. So goodbye marching ants, Command D. All right, not quite perfect is kind of the understatement here. How many of you have your brick wall here kind of go down or up or something? It's not perfectly level. I'm guessing most of us have some not perfection. So what we're going to do is use a different tool to fix that. So back in the tools that we're using in the flyout menu, Spot Healing Brush, we've seen samples what's around it and fills it inside. The patch tool, we took the whole selection and told it to fill with something else. In between the tool is just the plain old healing brush. So choose that one. And before we move on, they have given us some presets. Up at the top bar in the brush size drop down, we want to make this one a 60 pixel brush, and we want it to be 30% hardness. So this is kind of a soft edge. So it's going to kind of blur our edges. We're not going to see hard edges. Again, click on that, to get that menu to collapse, click on the icon right above it, the brush size, and then bring your cursor out into your image and you'll see how physically big it is. Very rarely never when you're color correcting or fixing pictures do you have a book telling you how big to make your cursor. You just bring it out here, you eyeball it, and you make it bigger or smaller with the bracket keys. So what we are going to do, and I'm going to zoom in on the top of, I'm going to zoom into this area because this is the part of the brick wall that I need to fix. And I have a nice size brush, and what normally, what we're going to do is we're going to tell it to literally sample what's underneath this cursor right now, pick it up and load it in the cursor. And that's what this clone stamp will do. So before with the healing brush we just clicked, I want you guys to just click. It says, nope. You need to option click to set up your source point. So you say, okay. So now put your cursor where a little bit of it is above the brick wall and a little bit of it is into that top brick. Hold down the option button and it turns into like a bullseye. And I want you to click once and let go of the option. Now move your cursor somewhere else and you can see that it's loaded with those exact pixels. Move it over the girl so you can really see. Okay. Bring it back over and line it up to the right of that brick where it starts going down or getting bad. And you're going to click and hold, and basically you're going to paint with that selection. But notice, look at my screen quick if you can. Now that I'm clicking and holding, do you guys see the plus sign to the left of it a little bit? That's where it's sampling from. So as I drive to the right, it comes along with me too. And this is going to work until I hit the point where that brick no longer existed. It still knows what's under there, and it's going to start painting with what used to be under there. So I need to stop and do it again. I need to come back and option click and reload my brush again before I continue painting over to the right. Because it knows what used to be under there, not what is now. So I can do that process and fix this next line in the brick that's off. I can option click on this dark black line and then click and hold and start painting to the right. But if I go too far, I'm going to paint what used to be. So I botched up there. It's important that you reset your paint or your option point quite a bit. Whenever that plus sign gets over where you've now fixed it and it looks good, it really isn't. It's still sampling what was underneath there. So option click to load your cursor and then paint to the right or the left with that loaded cursor to try to fix it up a little bit. So the top of that brick is important. Maybe as I get down further, it doesn't look so bad. If this floor area where it reaches the floor is all wonky, you're going to want to go in and correct that as well. The other thing I'm seeing is that this looks very repetitive. I'm seeing the exact same blemishes twice because I painted that way, right? So you want to look for things that are like dead giveaways, that you've done something. And in this case, just watch for a second, even if you're not done. Let's just say that this blemish right here, I just want to get rid of. So I'm just going to option sample clean area next to it and kind of paint over it so that it doesn't, that pattern doesn't repeat from the brick next to it. So it's not an obvious redo. I got another one of those up here where it's pretty obvious what I did. Remember, I have a soft brush, so it's going to kind of blend the edges. If I want it to literally pick up those pixels, hard edge, I would switch my brush to have a harder edge, and then it wouldn't blend as much. So with the clone stamp tool, that rubber stamp tool, or no, totally lied, we're not there yet. This is the healing brush tool. The cool thing about the healing brush, this family that we're in right now, is not only does it pick up the pixels and drop them and put them where you tell them to, after it does that, it blends the edges, blends the lighting, blends the tone. It's an awesome, awesome tool. The one I accidentally referred to, the stamp down here, we'll get to another time. That one literally picks up pixels and drops them. It doesn't blend the edges, it doesn't change the lighting. So if you're working on a face and skin tone and there's a zit right here, and you sample clean skin over here really close, and you plop it on top of the zit, there's a chance it's going to be lighter or darker skin tone because it's away from there by just a tiny bit, but it'll be really obvious because you have a hard edge. Whereas this one will match the lighting, match the tone, and blend it out. So these are really helpful tools. All right, let's save our work. File, save. And then Command 0 so you can see the whole thing again. And if you're like me and you're looking like, why do I have this blob of brown? What the heck is going on up here? Well, the last tool I used was the healing brush, and I sampled some of this brick, so it's still loaded. If I don't want to see that, I just switch to a new tool, and I don't have to deal with that blob following me around anymore. Okay, so we did a relatively good job of fixing this given the 3 skills we know so far, right? I'm going to finish in the book and then come back to some extra stuff that's helpful. So the last step, we talked about the whole workflow. In this case, we did crop it down to a certain size first, and we're making our corrections from that point forward. But the reality is the quality of this image, this 7 by 7, this is as big as it's ever going to go. So this is the full-size file, really. So we color corrected, we cleaned up, we straightened, cropped. The last thing you'd want to do is sharpen. So try to get some crispness back. I'm going to show you examples in a bit that are much easier to see than this book example, but nonetheless, we'll run through it. So the last task is to sharpen. First thing that we want to do, though, is really zoom in to 400%. And we're going to do that on the little boy's shirt. Oops, that's a little too high. I'm at 600% on the little boy's shirt. Do you guys see, and probably look at your monitors, do you see these bright blue pixels every now and then? This dust and noise and pixelation and just yuck. We want to get rid of that before we sharpen it, because if we sharpen it, we're just going to make the edges on any existing pixel more dramatic, and those will stand out even more. So the first thing we want to do is kind of fix that. We're going to go up to the filter menu, and we're going to choose noise, and then dust and scratches. We're going to click on that, and it's going to give us a preview window. And by clicking and dragging your mouse with the hand in this preview window, you can scroll around to see a preview of how it's going to fix it. So I took my preview to be the little boy's shirt, and I'm also going to zoom in a little bit. And I can see how, also I can see in my main screen, but I can see how those blue pixels are gone. Anytime you have a preview window like this, if you click on your mouse and hold down inside the preview window, it shows you the before view. And when you let go, it shows you what this setting is going to do. We want to change this. Actually, we don't. We're going to leave it where it is. The radius and the threshold we're going to leave. And we're going to say, okay. So that kind of smoothed it out. It took away the digital noise and any like dust that might be on there, but it's certainly not a crisp image. If you're in the zoom tool, you can right click and say 100%, or you can command 1 to get to 100%. Now we actually want to sharpen the image so that it looks as crisp as it can. We're going to go under filter. This time we're going to pick sharpen, and then smart sharpen. And again, you're going to get a preview window. So you can move around. Maybe actually looking at the pavers in the foreground is a pretty interesting area because there's some texture in here. Make sure that your preview button is checked in this window so we are seeing a preview of what it looks like. From the remove drop-down box, do you want to remove the Gaussian blur, the lens blur, or the motion blur? The lens blur is the default. That's the one that you want checked. This is going to sharpen our detail in the image. Gaussian blur increases the contrast along the edges of an image, and motion blur reduces the effects of the blur from camera shake or movement. So lens blur is the default, and that's what you want to be on. The slider amount, how much are we going to sharpen it? I want you to take it up to an extreme and look at your previews. And then I want you to pull it back to no sharpening and look at your preview. You should be seeing a difference here. I'm not getting mine to catch up with me. It should be very dramatic when you're at 500% sharpening. We're going to take it to about 60%. Somewhere in there, or you can type in the actual number. The radius slider, we're going to make it a little bit bigger, so how big it looks when it's sharpening. We're going to take up to 1.5. And if we're happy with that amount of sharpening, we're going to say, okay. Again, I don't think this is a great file to practice on. I'm going to show you some that are much, much better. Okay, let's do a file save, and that is the end of that chapter in this book. So we did some basic photo corrections. Everybody okay with that?